Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today could only hear "you should sell these" from his friends and family so many times before taking action, and it's been a smashing success so far. Please welcome the cook and the man behind Benny's Burgers, Benny Rodriguez. What's going on, Benny?
Hey, thanks, Biggie. Thanks for having me. Just hanging out, man.
Very, very welcome, man. Very, very welcome. Okay, so obviously we're on my lunch break, so I know what the answer is going to be, so we'll go two parts when it comes to restaurants. I always ask two versions of this. I want you to give me what would be like the go-to Benny's Burgers like order for someone that would be coming up to the truck, and then the other one would be is if you're not in the truck, what's your go-to lunch or sandwich?
Okay. Well, we have a very simple menu, so we only do the Oklahoma fried onion burger. We offer a single, a double, and a triple, and then we have fries as well that we fry to order. So my ideal order is just a Benny burger. That's a double Oklahoma fried onion burger with our fries. We have our own seasoning blend for them, so it is a great sandwich, a great lunch or dinner. And then we just have cokes. So I mean, who doesn't love a coke
Yeah,
with a
no, you're
burger,
good. And then what
right?
about when you're not on the truck?
Oh man, that's a little tough. It's tough because I just moved up here. So is it in Orlando or
Nope.
it's just
It's whatever you decide to whatever your go-to lunch. Like what's a typical, like if you were like, man, I'm hungry for lunch, I want to get something. What would you get? It doesn't have to be a restaurant. It could be like, hey, I just like grilled cheese and that's what it is.
okay? Fair enough. Honestly, man, you can't go wrong with the wings at Flanagan's. I
Okay.
grew up in Miami.
Yeah.
I love the hot wings there. They're like the shrimp there is fantastic too. The firecracker shrimp, real
Hmm.
good too. So you can't go wrong with that. And they do a great lunch deal.
Yeah, they
So
do. That's a good one. I don't get to eat there too often. Obviously, it's in South Florida, and obviously the cup. Everyone loves their plastic the plastic cup that you get there. Okay, so tell people a little bit about the story. Like what was the story? How did Benny's Burgers start? How did it go?
sure. So I started making the Oklahoma fried onion burger around the pandemic. I had gotten a Blackstone. I looked it up. I started doing it. Alexa had always told me like, hey, maybe there's something here to this. We could do something with this. Maybe we can grow this. And I mean, like I said, I was an accountant, or I used to be an accountant, like we were talking about before, and I was making okay money, so I definitely had a lot of security in that. Kind of put it off. Pandemic ended. A couple years later, we moved up here, and I was making it for some friends, and they were just like, "Man, this is fantastic! You got to sell this." And made some calls and we did it. We have, like I said, we go in just on that one type. So
So okay, let's backtrack on a few things. One, for those who are not smash burger or burger aficionados, what is an Oklahoma smash burger? What is the difference between that and other smash burgers that you would get other places? Let's first go with that, and then I'm going to ask questions about, the decisions in that conversation and all that stuff. But let's first talk about the food itself.
okay, sounds good. So an Oklahoma fried onion burger is actually from Oklahoma. It's a regional sandwich. It usually starts off with julienne Vitalia onions that are smashed into a patty, and then the patty's seasoned. There's American cheese, and it's crowned with the bun on top of the meat while it's still on the griddle. I happen to use Martin's potato rolls. George Moats uses Martin's potato rolls. He's definitely was a huge inspiration for this. Um, and I mean, I've heard it described as adult White Castle. So
No, it's good and it smells. The smell alone is like it's like because it's one of those where you're like, man, that is like delicious. And if you like onions, which is one thing that I love, that's one of the things I like about it because you literally I was watching in your Instagram reels Like it's like literally, it's almost like it's the burger, but it's just like everything's covered in onion, and then there's more onion, sautéed onions to go with it. So it's like if you like onions and cheese and all, I mean, it is delicious. What is the name? The other thing I had, because you said you have a triple, which I did not see on the menu before. What is that one called? Because if that one's a Benny, what's a
So,
was that a Big Benny? What is it? What is it called?
we haven't really called it,
Okay,
because to be honest with you, man, a triple is something that I have there as an option for the customers. I personally think it's too much meat, you know.
yeah,
So it's one of those things where it's a fine print thing, and if you really want it, you seek it out. Then we have it for you,
yeah,
you know. Um, so I've never really wanted to like name the triple. I do eventually want to do a more deluxe burger. That has the lettuce and the tomato and all that. We're just still working the logistics of that.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah.
And then the other thing is you have one called, is it machi fries? And is that like basically like the burger no bun? Is that kind of like, I would not say the carbless version because you're eating it on fries, but is it all the stuff like on a burger, but it's just all put on top of fries?
So that's something that was in our original menu when we
Okay.
first started out. I couldn't really get the sauce right. I'm still not 100% like satisfied with it,
Okay.
because I feel like it tastes like a lot of the other sauces, and I want something different. So I haven't come up with that yet. But the idea is simple, right? It's just a bed of French fries with the meat, cheese, and onions on top of it, and no bun. So like a
That,
loaded fries, if
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
will.
No, no. It looks, I read about it on your website. That's what led me to ask the question. So that's definitely a good one. All right. So let's kind of let's start hitting some of these things, questions that I like to ask or have, just because I'm always kind of curious. So I know you come from a long line of cooks. I know your dad owned a bodega in Washington Heights, and all of that. So like, and I know that you kind of started with the idea that like, hey, kind of like you started like a lot of people, COVID, and you're like, hey, you started with like kind of, we'll call it like a hobby that then becomes like a side hustle business. Where in the conversation with you, between you moving from South Florida to Orlando, did you guys just go, "Oh, hey, Alexa, I think I'm just gonna like let's just spend the money and buy a trailer and like and let's just jump all in." Is that something that you usually like when it comes to things
Well,
like this, or like how did that conversation go where you're like, "Hey, I think I got something to," and then jumping right into like, we're gonna jump into this.
so when we moved up from Miami, I was working with like a property management company
Okay.
that had a deal contract with a big name, and we were I was on that team, and I moved up here. I was working remote the whole time. Everything was great, and we got news that the contract was no more. And although we were promised phone calls and positions and all that, the weeks went by after the announcement, and that didn't come. So, I looked around me in this house that we're in, and I'm like, I can't just leave it up to these people, right? Because the contract, this was in about September. The contract is due to expire like on January 31st, right?
Oh, okay.
Of 2024. Um, so long story short, lost the contract, the job. They never told me what was going to happen. So I said, I have to take matters into my own hands. So left that job because I found this other position at a company here in Orlando, managing vacation rentals. And, you know, that didn't pan out. I ended up being laid off 3 months after I was hired. And I was just like, man, and that was around the time where we had the friends over, and that was just the one time, right? Because I had heard that a bunch of times. Like, oh my God, you should sell this. You would sell it like hotcakes, whatever. That was the one time where I was like, you know what? This is just crazy enough. Where let's just do it. The last employer had been keeping me on the payroll for a little bit because they had to let me go so suddenly because of like the disaster in the books that were in there. Um, so we just, you know, we made a phone call. I mean, my mom had been dying to do a business for a while, have her as a partner, and here we are.
So yeah, basically it kind of almost was like opportunity kind of forced its hand on you. It almost was like, hey, this is the opportunity and this is the window, come on in and let's see let's take it for a whirl. And let's
Pretty much, man.
yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, I was an accountant before. I had been an accountant for almost 10 years. Every single job that I've had as an accountant has either ended in some sort of merger that results in jobs being cut, or somebody selling to somebody else, or a contract not being renewed, or some sort of turmoil inside the company. And it's scary to have. I mean, I'm sure you can attest to that, right? It's
yeah,
scary to have your
yeah,
own business. Um, but once you get to a point where you're stable enough, right, then you don't have to worry about somebody else making bad decisions. You can make the bad decisions yourself.
yourself. Yeah, no, man, I totally get that. So what's interesting is that you're doing, and what I give you total like, because you're coming into an area that's brand new to you because you're coming in from Orlando a few months, and then all of a sudden now you're like, I'm going to do this in Orlando, so it's a brand new spot, trying to figure out the layout of the land, trying to figure out running a business, a food business at that, because now you're trying to figure out, you're going it from doing it as, hey, I'm doing it good at home on my Blackstone to now doing it on a truck. Tell me a
Sure.
little bit about the growing pains and that learning curve of like how you kind of like, because it's kind that's a tough one. You got to give yourself a little bit of you got to give yourself a little bit of empathy at the same time, like a little credit, because but it's hard because you don't have time, you don't have that much time, because now you're also, this is like your business, so it's like a
Correct.
mix of all these things. Tell me a little bit about that, because that's tough, man.
I mean, it's tough to live as an accountant. There's always the cycle, right? You start bankruptcy in the beginning, and then you do stuff, and at the end, you present the financials, right? And it's usually like off of a checklist where when you have your own business, you wake up every morning like in sandbox mode, right? Like if you play video games,
Yeah,
right? Sandbox is where the game puts you on an open map and says, "Dale, go do your thing," do whatever you want, which is great, right? But it can definitely be overwhelming at times because what do I do here? What do I do there? And in terms of growing pains, man, that's definitely been one. Another thing is definitely driving the thing. I mean, I think service is the best part, right? Service is great. Even the prep for service is great. Prepping the meat, prepping the onions, getting everything set up. That's all fantastic. But getting it there, right? And getting it hooked onto the truck, maneuvering it through Orlando traffic to wherever, sticking it into wherever they want you to stick it into, that is something that now, I mean, I think I've gotten okay at it. I mean, before I destroyed the bumper of my F-150. Not destroyed, but it has
yeah,
little marks on it from
yeah.
the trailer.
I can
So
imagine, dude.
yeah, man, it's crazy.
I Hey, and then how did you go about, like, so once you decided, I'm just kind of curious on this, because like, so once you decided you wanted to do this, like, did you start like following certain people? Like, how did you get into the, hey, how do I get into these markets? Or did you start asking people like, hey, where should I sell my stuff? Because it's great that you have that, but I know it sometimes it gets hard, especially now they've made it more stringent, some of these rules for like
Right.
for food trucks and for people to feed. So I'm kind of curious on kind of how that kind of goes.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty good with the regulatory stuff. So I used to work at a brewery and I worked in restaurants. So in terms of, getting the licenses and all that, I had a pretty good idea of what to do and getting registered to pay for sales tax and stuff like that. In terms of events, I mean, or one of the first people I met was Nico in the game, and I just Instagram, I guess, listens to you, man. I mean, and I used to come up here a lot, so I would get a lot of like suggestions, I guess, for like different food places and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I had, I guess, I don't know, Instagram definitely like plugged me into it, and then I started going to Tasty Takeover. I think we went to a Milk Mart, and I think we went to like a couple of events at Ivanhoe. Actually, at Ivanhoe, that's where I met Nico. he was there.
And go ahead, plug Nico's Instagram.
So food on the spectrum. He's fantastic, and I mean, love the kid. He does great events, and he put us on to one of the events at Orlando Meat Market. It was
Yeah,
Yeah, it was something. Yeah, like it was a boar's head
yeah, yeah,
purveyor. It was
yeah.
like a
The
warehouse.
provisions is like a provisions
The
place.
Orlando Provisions,
Hmm.
yeah, and we went out there. I think that's where we met Leveled Up Lemonade. Lucas, I don't know if
Oh
you've met
yeah,
him.
they're
He's
great.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's real cool. Uh, yeah, it's a great community, man, and that's something that I wanted to plug into again. I had worked a couple years in craft brewing, and that's great. Going to the different events and walking to different breweries and having people, know you, and everybody kind of works together. Even
yeah,
though there's obviously competition, right? But there's a lot of working together.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, man.
What What do you think has been your biggest, obviously then once you started figuring things out, because I mean it's a lot. I'm just amazed by. Granted, I've also come to the conclusion that when your back's against the wall, sometimes you're up. You start swinging and you really find out about who you are, and then and in this particular case, it was like I have an idea and I got to make this work. So I'm gonna like do what I need to do to do it. So you start figuring out and figuring out who the people are, where you need to sell, how to sell, but what are some of the hurdles that you think you've gone through that you're kind of, now that you've started, and that that are kind of tough, that sometimes a lot of people starting a new business may probably go through.
Well, I think it's definitely not as oh. I think sometimes we get like this picture painted of like, oh, all you got to do is just do it, just jump in and do it. And I mean, I agree with that, but you got to take that with like a grain of salt, right? Like doing it is definitely difficult. There's a lot of things um, that people don't consider, right? I'm pretty sure that most people that open a food truck, especially if you haven't been on the operation side of a restaurant, don't realize that you have to deal with water, right? And where to put the dirty water and where to get the clean water and the gas and the maintenance of the generator. There's a lot of, and even just driving, right? Like we were talking before, there's a lot of things that go into it that have to be considered. And I think trusting yourself, I guess, to like figure those things out is really the the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
Because right, a lot of times you're like, am I really doing this? Is this really working? Like, people come up and say, hey, the burger is great, and you're like, oh, that was probably for the other guy. You probably confused me for the other guy, you know.
What what Okay, so I talk about the hard part, but what's been the part you've loved so far? Because so far you guys have been in open, what, for a year now, give or take a
Well,
year.
we're yeah coming up on a year. We really started going in April of 24. We had like a couple of events, like I want to say
Hmm.
like 4, and then in May we really ramped it up. So yeah, we're coming on about a year. Um, I think the best part is like serving people and going to the events and starting to like recognize people, whether it's like vendors or customers, right? I think that's the greatest part because um, like I grew up, I never really moved around, right? Like I moved down from New York when I was 6, and then I kind of stayed in Miami, kind of moving around Miami, but in Miami, right? And when we got to Kendall, we kind of stayed in Kendall, right? Don't say, I had a sense of community there. So I think that this has definitely fast tracked like my sense of community. So I think
Yeah.
that that's the best part,
Yeah.
pulling up and seeing the homies, man. Like that's really the best.
Yeah. What I find interesting, and I think this is something that I at least, and you obviously would know more than I would, because I had family that lived in South Florida. But the one thing that I will say that you just listening is that I don't know. Could you have been able to pull off what you're doing currently right now with Benny's Burgers in South Florida versus being here in Orlando. I think there's like a little bit more openness to some ideas of business, and there's a lot more. I don't know. I kind of look at it as like there's definitely a little bit more openness to like the markets, the pop ups, and all those things of the community, of the support and stuff like that than you probably would in South Florida.
100%. People come out in Orlando. I mean,
Yeah.
Orlando really comes out for the events. There's areas where that happens in Miami, but those areas are so congested and have so much traffic that you really gotta want to go to make it happen, right?
Yeah.
Where I think in Orlando you could be in Oviedo, you can be, in Mills, you could be in the Milk Mart, you can be in Kissimmee, I mean, even in downtown St. Cloud.
Yeah.
Um, so that's definitely great.
Yeah. Okay. So I got some foodness to discuss with you because I'm just kind of curious. What one is? Do you consider the burger a sandwich?
I mean, am I at the? I think so. I
Okay.
I think it's a sandwich. It's.
Burger Beast agrees with you, by the way.
I
If
saw
you
you had
know,
him on your show. Yes,
yeah,
he's awesome.
Burger Beast has said that. I know he's got a book and he calls it the sandwich, and I know it's between bread, but I obviously I do not. I call it the cousin of the sandwich. They're all handheld friends, but I don't.
A hot dog, though, I think that's where I draw the line because it's really not between two pieces of bread, right? It's like in between, like one piece of bread, and you kind of holding it like this. You know what I mean?
Like
Like
a
as opposed to
taco.
a burger, almost like a taco. You
But
know?
just so you know, a hot dog, I don't know if you know this, but a hot dog without a bun still called a hot dog. So it's not I don't consider I consider a hot dog it's like its own little world, like its own little thing. Like that's how like a same thing with a sausage. But like a burger and like and I think I told you this when we first met cuz so just so you know, like how I met Benny, the my first time was actually I didn't even meet him. I literally I my first time I met him, I tasted him and then I met him. Is how I went because I had a friend who bought his burger and I could smell it and she got stopped every time whatchamacallit that she was walking around and she actually wrote about it. It was Amy Drew from the Sentinel and my co-host of Let's Eat Orlando. We talked about how like I was selling at Goblin Market. She came to visit me. She saw Benny was there, smelled it and said, "Oh my God, what is that? That is amazing." Got food, and obviously she can't eat all the stuff, so I'm very open. I'm like, oh, I'll eat a burger and fries. So she took some bites of it, and then I finished it, and I was like, this is a good ass burger. I was like, my daughter would eat the hell out of this because we love a good oniony burger, and it was good. Like the crispy edges. The onions were cooked really well. I mean, it was I loved it. So then I introduced myself to him just to tell him. I didn't even tell him who I was. I just was like, hey, I just want to let you know your burger's delicious. And that's all I did. That's all I went because I was just like, I just want to tell him that his burger was delicious. And then I got to see him again at Milk Mart
Milk
at
Bar.
another event a few months later. And we all crushed it. And then like I finally got a chance to talk to him. And it's funny because I was all excited because I saw that he was going to be right near me, but we were both so busy I never got a chance to order any food from him. And then he was sold out, which is a great thing. But that's one of the reasons why I was like, oh, we started talking. Me and I started talking with you and Alexa, your wife, and I just like thought was your story was so interesting that I was like, man, I'm like, I wanna talk to you more about it on the podcast because I told you before when we were texting, we as a lot of small businesses, we see each other and we create relationships, but we don't actually get to have major conversations or any time spent together because a lot of times it's before either in the beginning in the prep when you're like, hey, what's going on, how you doing, and then you're like, go, I got to set up my stuff, and then or the tear down, or in your case, like if you sold out and you're able to kind of walk around
Right.
and stuff like that. But other than that, you don't really get to have really much interaction sometimes with some businesses. So that's one of the reasons why I love kind of being able to do this stuff because I'm always intrigued by like how people really kind of want to start it and how they kind of go with it. What do you think? My other question is food related and it has nothing to do. It's more of the fact of what do you think is because I was even talking with Amy Drew about it is there's been a massive like trend on the love of smash burgers. It's not like smash burgers is something new, but what
Mhm.
is it that you think that so many people have like gravitated to it and because of that there's so much competition of other people doing it.
I think the smash burger is like a I think it's a better way to eat ground beef, right? I've never been one to like hamburgers that are like particularly thick. Because at the end of the day, it's ground beef, right? If I want something thick, I'm gonna have like a sirloin or a fillet or something,
Hmm.
of that caliber. Eh, and I think too, with the smash burger, there are times where you get people that go crazy with it and pile, like Burger Beast said, pile a bunch of shit on it. Um, but for the most part, you want to keep, I think people are keeping it simple, and I think
Yeah.
that that is the most important thing, right? Like the approachability, right? Like a blue cheeseburger with the wine reduced onions, so whatever, and the arugula all sounds fantastic, and you could probably charge $26 or $30 for it. But who's gonna order it, right? Who's gonna really enjoy that, right?
Yep.
If you want the arugula and the blue cheese, just have a salad. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. No, I get that. I totally get that, and I agree. And I think also the key thing is, so when you make, I'm just kind of curious. So like, so you could tell people. I know we talked about how you make it, but like, do you add any condiments to it? What do you
No,
what like? So you basically you want it. You're like, I want you to be able to taste the quality of my meat, the onions, the cheese, all those things. You shouldn't really even. I mean, if you want it, that's fine. I may have like a little
correct.
packets or whatever.
We have the
Yeah.
packets there, and actually at Milk Mart we had the stanky sauce. We had like two different hot sauces they
Yeah.
brought
Yeah.
over, and that was fantastic. Eh, but yeah, I mean, there are times where I've wrestled with the idea of saying like, you know what, no substitutions. Tell me how many patties you want on it, one, two, or three, right? But again, I do want the approachability. There are some people that are anti onions, so you do the no onions, right? But I think that it has, the meat is 80/20, so it lets go of fat, and like the onions kind of cook in it. The onions in turn are letting go of like moisture, all that. You season it, so that brings out a little bit more moisture in the onions. When you flip and put the American cheese on it, that's melting. The bun, it's getting like nice and like steamed up with all the
Hmm.
different like vapors that are coming up. By then, I'm like turning off the griddle so it doesn't burn. Even though you do want a little bit of char, right, in some of the
Yeah.
onions,
Yeah.
that it kind of breaks it up. Um, and it's not a sandwich that I think is very dry, right? Because you don't have that giant like layer of ground beef, even if it's a double, right? Because it's interrupted. So,
Yeah, because you got the cheese, you got the onion, you got all that stuff all together.
right.
And which, like I said, delicious, absolutely delicious.
I
I
like to
thought,
leave it in the packaging too for a second. Like I always try to tell people like leave it for a second to kind of let it finish steaming in there, and then the bread
okay,
gets really nice and.
almost like a
I mean, it's
steamed
perfect.
pocket.
It almost is like that, man. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. I think what you're doing is fantastic. Ta, so I know obviously what I also will like. I also think is great is because it reminded me. I don't know why, but the thought in my head was the Saturday Night Live skit when people go like, "Hey, like what's your menu?" And you're like, "Oh, my menu is really simple." And then I don't know if you remember it, where the guy's like, "Cheeseburger, cheeseburger, Pepsi." That's all he does. Like you're like cheeseburger, cheeseburger, Coke, like that's it, and fries.
Pretty much.
Like, but
Pretty much.
so is there a thought process? Do you have a thought of like possibly expanding to do the more of the menu, or sometimes sometimes I think like simple is in. I think that's like or is the
I like
idea to kind of like because you had mentioned about maybe adding some lettuce and tomato and things like that. Like, what's the thought process as you evolve, as you start figuring things out? What's the thought process of like what are you going to start adding? Because I got ideas, I got ideas.
Listen, man. So we do have a very simple menu, right? But I take pride in the fact that nothing, I mean, absolutely nothing that we make is pre-cooked in any way,
Yeah.
right? So I have a system down where I'm dropping the fries in the grease and I'm building the burger in the time that the fries are cooking so that like the fries aren't soggy, and and there's a lot of that is due to the fact that our menu is so simple, right? If I wanted to do something like a more deluxe burger, I'd probably want like a bigger patty. So now I have another decision to make. I'd probably want like a bigger bun. So now I have another decision to make, and then I'd have to go over to the sandwich prep to kind of add that. Um, and there are a lot of times where it's Alexa and I, but there's also times where it's by my, I'm by myself. She's also pregnant, so we're expecting in May our first daughter, which I'm very excited
Congratulations.
for. Thank you. But that obviously has to be factored into our business decisions, right? And pretty soon I'm going to have to be thinking about, you know, doing things a lot more on my own and then eventually bringing someone on. And that requires training and all that stuff. So
An
I
extra
can't.
cost.
Correct. Well, sure, absolutely. But you're juggling so many things, and I don't want to add like a proverbial like tomato and lettuce thing, and now I'm juggling more things. I want to keep it as consistent as I can. At the end of the day, some of these guys have an impressive resume, like working at really impressive places and with a lot of experience, and I definitely respect that, to the point where I guess I'm honest with myself of what I can do, and I want to give the people the best, that
No,
I can.
but I will tell you this: there is nothing wrong with just a good a good burger. Like I don't like you don't need all the rest of the other things. Like that's why I'm like I like the fact that you have it just like this is what it is. You know what I mean? Like maybe I'll add a sauce to maybe I'll add a sauce to it. Like a yeah,
Right.
and I'm like, and that's it.
Uh-huh.
But like we're good. Like I'm good. I have like you got all the flavor. I want you to taste all the flavors of the meats and everything like that. Like and there's enough. And the good thing also is there's a nice little pocket there because like everyone else, like you said, is building and doing all these other crazy burgers and crazy things that sometimes you just need like the like hey, I just know I know what I'm getting, consistently
Sure.
good. So I totally I think it works either way, and you can kind of rationalize it either way. But I definitely know that like I think it works very well with what you're doing.
So,
And people know what they're expecting to get, and they're going to get a good burger when they come and get some good tasty fries, and go from
uh,
there.
and I just, I wanted to circle back real quick to when you asked me about like the popularity of the
Yeah,
smash burger and all that. And um, I even though it's kind of it is, I think like it's one of those things where all Oklahoma fried onion burgers are smash burgers, but not all smash burgers are Oklahoma fried onion burgers, right?
correct.
And it's like a regional sandwich. Even though, admittedly, I've never been to Oklahoma, that's something that I definitely want to do, and it's like on the short-term bucket list where I definitely gotta get that, because I do want to go try that at a lot of the places that made that famous. Um, but growing up in Miami, the Cuban sandwich is like super important. Fritas are super important. Like those are regional sandwiches, right? Tampa also has their version of the Cuban sandwich. They say it's better. I don't think so, but well, that's a whole other
Yeah, it's a
conversation.
different conversation.
I don't want to start beef with Tampa, but I think it's one of those things where that's something that's been around for a long time, and it's because people like that, right? Like people like, um, who doesn't like meat, cheese, and bread
Onion.
and meat and
Yeah.
onion? You go, yeah. I mean, who doesn't love that? I mean, it's
Where did you have it, or where did you come up with it? Because if you've never been and had it in Oklahoma, because I know,
so
like, to give you an idea, like when I talked to the guys, from Jam Hot, like he went to a place and he had like the chicken in California, and then had the comeback sauce and was like hooked on making like having like this hot chicken and doing all that. So like, what was your trigger point? That you're like, this is it, the Oklahoma onion burger. Like, what was it that got you there?
Okay, so in 2020, I lost my job in March of 2020. Like, actually, it was April 1st that I got the call, which was crazy because that's April Fool's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I know. I know. There's a whole other story there, but I want to. And that sent me into a period of my life that I like to call the suicidal sabbatical, which was 8 months of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I went through a couple jobs. Like I had like three or four different jobs before I ended up at the place that I worked at for almost 3 years, and I moved here with that
Yep.
job, whatever. Um, and I started going down YouTube rabbit holes, man. And there's this guy that popped up on my YouTube feed called George Motes, and he had this like Oklahoma fried onion burger, and it looked delicious. And the Blackstone was like starting to be popular. Like everybody wanted a Blackstone. I was like, man, I got to get myself one of these. and I started doing it, and it was great. And I think too at the time I saw the founder, right? And I was just like, I've always been blown away by like how things work, right? And how like McDonald's like has that system of just like super fast and super consistent and doesn't matter where you go. And like they started that, I mean, the two brothers started that drawing it off in a basketball court, right?
Yep,
And
I
like
remember. It was a
practicing
great movie.
yeah, so I don't know, man. I was like, I guess people would tell me I could sell it, but I guess I would also tell myself, like, man, maybe I could sell it. But then you have that imposter syndrome of like, nah, I can't sell it. Like, Etadibo with the hair can sell it. And then whatever. So I got the job. I've been making the burgers, right? Got my Blackstone every once in a while, have people over, we make the burgers or whatever. And George Motz, before he did Hamburger America, would go around like after the pandemic, right? After the shoot out of his Brooklyn apartment and the Burger Scholar stuff. And before Hamburger America, he would do like tours all over and go to like burger spots. And he went to one in North Miami. And I went to it in I think the it's called like the Burger Truck or something like that. And it's like
Okay.
an actual restaurant in North Miami, a little burger joint. And he had an event there, and I got the tickets on Eventbrite, whatever. It got me a burger. I went with Alexa and we tried it. And we're like, like this is pretty similar to what you're doing. Like, maybe we can do it. So, it just stayed in the back burner until I got like forced into a corner, man.
Dude, that's the way. The what I will say, and this is the part that you like, I tell people to kind of never forget or take a moment to acknowledge it. Like like sometimes like and one of my first guests said said this to me, and I was like, wow. She's like inspiration is like a muse where she will basically whisper in your ear and tell you like, hey, you should do this. And then what happens is you either talk yourself out of it or someone else does it for you, does it, and then you're like, oh coño, I could have done that, I could have been doing this. And so
Hmm.
the mere fact that you actually listened and you're like, I think I got something, because that's the hard one. The hard one is what you have, like what you said, like, yeah, like there, yeah, you could possibly have some imposter syndrome. Everyone kind of probably deals with it, even the world's best. But it's the moment of trying to figure out how is it that I'm going to get over this, or how am I going to, yeah, like I'm going to make it my way, or I'm going to just try, because it's very easy to talk yourself out of things.
Sure.
When you have that. With that being said, what advice would you have for someone wanting to start something?
Um, I think I think you gotta trust yourself, but you also gotta do the due diligence, right? And that can sometimes be a little bit contradictory. Um, but you do gotta trust yourself, and if you have something that you think is good, and you have the opportunity to do it, right? Because another thing too is that, I mean, I don't want to downplay at all the fact that I have my mom as an investor, right? If I didn't have my mom as an investor, I definitely would not be able to do this, especially, just having bought a house, just, expecting a baby, all that stuff. I would have just had to suck it up, find another accounting job that would have probably ended in some sort of merger or some bad decision by some dude, I don't know. But bueno, ni modo, and I think that that's also true. I mean, I think people have to be honest with that, because I've worked with people that have been in a situation where they're, if it wasn't for their parents or some sort of other angel investor, they wouldn't be doing it. And sometimes they don't want to talk about that because it seems like they don't, like, it diminishes what they're doing. But no, man, I mean, sweat equity is a thing, right? Like, el que se levanta a las 5 de la mañana a ir a mamárselo el camión soy yo. So, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so if you have the opportunity and you have whether, you have the savings or you have someone that you can convince to do something crazy with you, do it. Because, I mean, the worst that can happen is, it doesn't work and then you go back to whatever you were doing before, but you could just, get something big. So I don't
yeah.
know, man.
Yeah.
It's
No, I totally get it, man. I totally get it. And I totally agree with you on that. I also think that you kind of sometimes have to kind of look and see what are the options. How can you balance it if you can, like, you know, because I can only imagine how difficult it is. And I think I mentioned this before, and I just know how it is, like, to be able to find spots during the course of like the week, and like, like where do you go, and especially if you're gonna, like, and things like that, like, it's tough. I mean, there's a reason why I
Well,
do my job full time. I have a full time job, and I do this business. I do deli fresh threads on the side or in the after work, because there's only so much, time to be able to do it and go and sell, and people going out to eat and stuff.
no, and you're totally right, man. And that whole thing about finding events and all that. I mean, also, I'm very lucky to have my wife. Alexa does coordinate all our events for us. She does our Instagram, Eat Benny's Burgers, right? A little plug there.
Don't worry, I'll get
Uh,
you there. I'll get you to that. Don't worry.
uh, so, I mean, I've always wanted to do that on a podcast. This is my first time on a podcast, man. So I've always wanted to do that. But anyway, I'm really lucky to have her too, man. I mean, she right now is a teacher. She's at work. I mean, it's 5 o'clock and she's doing like parent meetings and all that. And that is, I mean, definitely challenging.
Yeah.
She's pregnant, for the love of God. And not everybody has a wife that says like, okay, yeah, this absolutely crazy thing that you're talking about, like, you as an accountant, go ahead and do it, don't worry about it, like, forget about it. It's crazy.
No, but I think that says a lot. That says a lot about what, like, the thought process of how you guys yin and yang, but also the fact of also like the trust that she knows, like, hey, and also in the belief of the product, because of the fact that she's like, oh, I think we have something here. We should give this a try. We should do this. I think it's all gravy, and I think it's something that and it's so important when it comes to that, because even though you're the one, cooking in the truck, that other aspect, if you don't have, especially when you're married, heck, my wife, I've told numerous times, my wife, I'm going to be celebrating 12 years as Deli Fresh Threads. My wife said to me when I first told her 13 years ago, hey, I want to start something, she's like, as long as we don't go bankrupt, I trust you. And I said, and I go, but it's crazy. And she goes, yeah, I don't care. She's like, as long I trust you. She goes, I know you're going to do it. As long as we don't go bankrupt and we can do what we need to do. She's like, I'm there. Like, I support you. And she has, God bless her.
It's
She has.
important, man.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh no, it's
Yeah, it's
super
important.
important.
Yeah,
It's
it's
super
super, super
important,
important.
because if you don't have buy-in, on your team, then you're not. It's very easy to just be like, it's not going to work, and that's it. But I also think you have to have, like, there's got to be like a love for it, where you're like, yeah, I think there is something. I just need to figure it out, and sometimes maybe it's a balance of like, hey, I'm going to do this, only on, like, we're going to do these on like Thursday night, weekends and things like that, and like,
Well, it's
and
funny.
figure that stuff
So
out.
it's funny you bring that up, because I guess another piece of advice that I can give is that there are people that are like smash successes or like instances successes, right? And it blows up, it goes crazy. That's fantastic. The fact of the matter is, though, that sometimes things don't aren't as lucrative as you once thought, right? And or sometimes your situation changes, right? So I think I'm at the point now where I definitely want to continue doing Benny's Burgers, and that's something that's very near and dear to me. But I do think like that I'm gonna go back to accounting for a bit and try to work during the week and then do this on the weekends and at night for those events, because things are getting more expensive, man.
Yeah.
And you know there's also so many burgers that I can sell and so many events that I can go to, right? And if you talk to a lot of people, I don't know if have picked up on the same sentiment in the community or in the industry. Things are down, man. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, restaurants are closing, food trucks are closing. Um, you know, Yesterday I was with uh, an owner of a food truck, pretty big food truck in Orlando, and he got a call from another food truck that was like offering to sell him his trailers, because he was done. So I don't want to get us to that point. I
Yeah.
want us to be able to survive this. Hopefully things get better. I don't know what needs to happen where, but hopefully things get better, and then we can get to a point where I can come back out of the accounting.
No, I
But
totally get that, man. And that's got to be and that's hard, but at the same time, like that's you'll figure it out. You'll figure out the balance of how you can kind of do that while you're able to kind of continue to grow the business, whether it's pop-ups and doing other things like that, and then figuring it out. I mean, that's just kind of how it always works out. Sometimes that's how you need to do. With that being said, where can people follow you? Where can people see where your events are going to be at, and where you're cooking, and where they can get some Benny's burgers at?
absolutely. So we're all over town. We go to all types of events. So the best place to find out where we're at is Eat Benny's Burgers on Instagram. I think we have a Facebook page and a TikTok, but we don't really do too much there.
Yep.
Like, I guess in pure millennial fashion, we're really Instagram people.
Yep.
So yeah, Eat Benny's Burgers.
Do you and you the update? You guys don't put anything on your website, right? Like it's mostly the Instagram is probably the best spot
Correct.
to be able to go and see where you're going to be eating at and what's going on, right?
Yeah, yeah. We set up the website, and we really that's not really the best spot to
Okay. I
like if
also
you want
know
to
that
contact us.
I think
I
you're
guess if
also
you
on a
want
roaming gourmet. Is it a roaming? I saw
roaming
something like that.
hunger.
Yeah,
I think
roaming
roaming
hunger or something
hunger.
like that. I read some stuff on there that was kind of cool to see for them to be able to. I think is that like a process? Is that like a place that like if people need to do food trucks or things like that? Like if they would need a place or they're looking for places, they're able to see that because I've seen it around.
I think that is the case with roaming hunger. I'm not sure if we've received any catering orders
Okay.
from them. We use a lot Food Truck Crazy. They're fantastic. Liz and Stephanie. For anybody that has a food truck and wants to maybe have some business during the week and go out to different like corporate offices and stuff,
Yeah.
they are fantastic.
Great. You got anything else? You got any other plugin?
I don't know, man. That's it. I think I've plugged enough for my first time on a podcast.
No, that's good, man. That's good. No, you did great. You did great. Thank you so much for Benny for being on and having being on the show today and having lunch during my lunch break with me. Definitely make sure to check out Benny's Burgers. Eat Benny's Burgers is the Instagram. If you enjoyed the show, definitely make sure to subscribe. Make sure to tell your friends. If you go eat Benny's Burgers, I keep saying this, people. I need selfies. I need selfies of you eating the burgers, telling them that you heard them on the podcast. Share the podcast with your friends if you've had it before. If not now, maybe it'll you be even more, a little bit more appetizing. That you're gonna. Oh, I want to check this place out. While we're talking, go look them up. I'll give them a follow. If you want to support my brand, check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads. Make sure to tell your friends. Thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion.